Okay, let's go. This is going to be a fascinating hour, and I'm truly honored to have this gentleman as a guest, and I hope all of you will learn, as I'm looking forward to doing, new things about very interesting subjects. Let me just leave it at that while I do the introduction here. The guest, of course, is, if you've looked at guests at Rense.com, Dr. Ken Johnston. Ken learned to fly in the U.S. Marine Corps, and in the 1960s, Ken was one of the 5 test pilots assigned to work with the astronauts during the Apollo Moon program at NASA in Houston. His job back then was to help train the astronauts to fly the lunar module. He was one of the test conductors and became the test director of the TM-5 lunar module spacecraft that was used to train all moon landing Apollo astronauts. All of them. In 1969, Ken was responsible for controlling all of the data and photographic. Let me do that again. I want to hit the word all. In 1969, Ken was responsible for controlling all of the data and photographic information generated from the lunar missions. All of the data and photographic information. Okay? Ken has 3 Bachelor's of Science degrees in aviation and aerospace engineering. He has a doctorate in divinity and a PhD in metaphysics. In 2001, NASA and JPL selected Dr. Ken Johnston to represent them in New Mexico as one of their solar system ambassadors. Ken is no longer with NASA or JPL, but continues to give lectures throughout the United States. To wrap up an amazing career, Ken has now come forward to disclose what was really found on the backside of the moon. He's retired now, raises miniature horses and donkeys in New Mexico, has a big family to have fun with, and really, I hope, is enjoying life. Another man who has served this country brilliantly. Ken, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you, sir. There was a recent story, and one of the reasons you're on, most specifically, had to do with a story that, well, you had some issues with it. Let's put it that way. It was all over the internet about the second week of September. NASA whistleblower, alien moon cities exist, and I saw the story back then, and it went on and on, round and round, and pretty fanciful things in it, but I thought I'd invite you on, and thanks to Jay Widener for setting this up. And I guess we could kind of start wherever you'd like, but I certainly do want to spend some time on the issue of your being in charge of and responsible for controlling all of the data and photographic information generated from the lunar missions. This is key information. All right, where would you like to start?
Well, I don't know. I guess we could start about in the beginning, particularly with this article where they were saying that, that I came out and said that there were alien cities, et cetera. A lot of that information was published by Richard C. Hoagland and Mike Barra in their book, Dark Mission. And, it's kind of interesting how the news, if you've been following it, which we all can't help from following it.
Right.
They have a tendency to kind of get a little tidbit, and then they start spinning it the way they want to see it.
Oh, they grow it into a mountain, some of them. They take a little... It's amazing what they do. It's far beyond spin. I mean, they almost create an entire fiction.
That's what it winds up. And there's so much real truth and information out there that if they just stick to the basics and do proper journalism and research things, I think all the public would be well informed. As far as being in charge of all of the photographic and data generated, this was at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory. All of the pictures that were taken during the missions to the moon, those that also went around the moon, it didn't land Apollo 10 and, of course, Apollo 13.
Okay, we're talking, excuse me, Ken, we're talking about all of the pictures taken en route to the moon, orbiting the moon, landing on the moon, leaving the moon, all of it went through your hands.
In addition, all of the photographic data that was generated at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory as the various scientists would come in from around the world and process some of the moon rocks, and then they would write up their particular reports as to what was found on the moon. And that kind of brings up an interesting story, Jeff. I was on a flight and talking with a person sitting next to me. We're talking a little bit about the Apollo program and the moon rocks, and this gentleman across confidentiality. He says, could I interview you? I'm with the Arizona Herald. And the reason I bring that up is that in the conversation we talked about some of the elements that are found in the moon rocks. We found that there was hydrogen, and we did find some oxygen. And I made the comment that if we were to set up a base, we could process that and we actually be able to create our own fuel for return flights and make it a little bit easier. Well, when the article came out, it said that Johnston said that they could land on the moon and fuel up their rockets. So,
just like pulling up to a gas pump. No problem at all.
No problem at all. No. But I helped generate the lunar sample information catalogs. Various scientists would take all of their writings, and if you know how doctors write, it's a little difficult. I had a whole typing pool of stenographers, and I would have to proofread and edit and put it into a document and create the lunar sample information catalog.
So you try to make it readable, is what you're saying.
Correct. And also would want to know where their particular rock came from on the lunar surface. So we had lunar surface pictures. We had the angles that it was, where it was cut. It was in the middle of this particular rock or on the sides. Mm-hmm. And then they would write up their particular reports on it like that. So these I would ship out all over the world with lunar samples. Now, we would have scientists who would come in, and they would want to have a picture and have a good, take a look and see what they were getting. And so that was quite an opportunity. And Dr. Jeffrey Warner had been in charge of it for the first 2 flights to the moon, and he asked me to take over from him. And I got a few commendations of cleaning up the mess and getting it to where everybody could find what they needed.
Well, you were sitting literally at the nexus of some of the most amazing information in history. I mean, that must have been very exciting for you.
It has been, and looking back over it, sometimes I look at it and I say, did we really do all of this stuff? But fortunately, I was a pack rat, and I kept all the documents and records and information, and actually was able, we'll get into that a little bit on the pictures that were taken.
Right. This is going to be very important and germane to the crux of our conversation here, which is we don't get the full story from NASA, which surprises absolutely nobody listening, but they do want to hear the details. Now, I'm not going to ask you to say yes or no, but I certainly hope you got a little piece of your own moon rock out of the deal somewhere along the line. I mean, how many pieces did they bring back? How many pounds altogether over the mission histories that we know about?
Since it's been well over 40-something years ago, so little details like that I've kind of let slip. I can dig it out for you, and on the program we can talk.
Well, you're certainly welcome to come back. Sure, I was going to say it had to be several hundred pounds. Yeah.
Hundreds of pounds, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in Houston.
Right.
The missions are underway. The telemetry is coming back. Photographs. Were they sending back live video to you as well?
We had both. We had live telemetry, photographic feed coming back. But primarily what I was interested in most were the Hasselblad cameras and the 16-millimeter sequence cameras.
Right.
There's quite a story behind Apollo 14 and what was discovered on the backside of the moon on the command module and the 16-millimeter sequence cameras.
Okay.
If I could go into that a little bit.
Well, let's do that. Now, the backside of the moon is never seen by us folks here on the ground. Clementine, and I've forgotten the year now, but Clementine, the U.S. naval satellite that went up and literally mapped, I guess, the entire backside of the moon, and perhaps the entire moon, if I remember correctly. But anyway, Clementine did the whole thing, supposedly. Those pictures, all of them have never been released to the public that I'm aware of. And it is said that the backside of the moon is a very interesting place. So tell us about Apollo 14.
All right. Apollo 14, as most people may recall, when we went to the moon, we had to separate the lunar module from the command module.
Sure.
The 2 astronauts that were to go on the lunar surface would descend in the lunar module and land on the surface and do their experiments down there. While they were on the surface, the command module pilot continued to go around and around and around the moon and had various experiments he had to do, as one of which was photographing the backside of the moon. Now, there was a director of the astronomy and department at the Manned Spacecraft Center at the time. It wasn't Johnson Space Center. Was Dr. Thornton Page, and very, very interesting gentleman. he contacted me and asked if I could get a hold of a specific reel of 16 millimeter film from the Apollo 14 mission.
All right. When was this? When was this, Ken? When did he ask you, approximately?
This was the astronauts. Let's see. This was Apollo 14, so we had stopped quarantining the astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
We had to quarantine Apollo 11.
I remember.
And Apollo 12 because there was concern about bringing back any
microbes,
contaminants.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was right within a week after we returned on Apollo 14